Hey everyone, this is DeagleBeagle, and today we're going to go over the overrated items, the underrated items, and the ones that aren't really underrated or overrated. So, let's just remove all this highlight stuff so you can see it better. I just highlight stuff that I haven't covered in a video yet. So, overrated items, I and others have said the items that extend terrain or weather, they're not usually that needed. You don't usually need Pelipper in for more than 5 turns, and if you do, you can probably send it back in right after the weather ends. And then same thing with the terrain extender. You typically don't need it more than 5 turns, even though it would help to block priority and whatnot. But there's so many other better items you could be using on average that it's like not typically worth it. And when I say overrated, I suppose since it's used so rarely, maybe it's not overrated. But Clear Amulet is overrated. Well, I guess if these two are still overrated because they should be pretty much never used unless someone can prove to me that there's a good reason why you should have it. And then Clear Amulet, this item's not always useless, but generally banned or white herb makes more sense, or trying to use a team with competitive or defiant allies to deter, intimidate instead, because Clear Amulet, the niche it has over white herb is you can use it more than one time, but white herb on average is going to be more useful than Clear Amulet if it's like Great Tusk or something where you're lowering your defenses, because if they intimidate you, then that activates white herb and then your attack goes back to normal. Same if they lower your special defense randomly from earth power or lower your defense from crunch, and something like, well, I suppose Clear Amulet would stop that. So, but typically they don't, for example, lower your defense twice with crunch or whatever. But to use it more than one time, I suppose you could use Clear Amulet, but just on average, like let's say they don't have Intimidate, or they have Intimidate, like an Intimidate Pokemon like Arcanine on their team, but it never ends up being picked or intimidating you for whatever reason, then Clear Amulet's basically a useless item. But Banned or whatever would basically have the same power even if they intimidate you. Yeah, you're locked into a choice move, which may not be ideal, but at least it's more consistent. Clear Amulet is not consistent enough. It would only be like a not overrated item if Intimidate was just super common and you switched in and out of it, in and out with it a lot, like, and they swapped out and in a lot with Intimidate or had multiple Intimidators. But that's just probably never going to be the meta for VGC 23. Maybe when we had Incineroar just spamming Intimidate, but now I don't think it's that bad. We do have Snarl and whatnot too, but just in general, I think most people agree that's overrated, but new players think it's really good, some of them. So anyways, the next one, I was gonna say Covert Cloak's overrated, and it is overrated on certain mons where people just slap it on, but it's not overrated in the sense that it can be used for more than one thing, like not just for fake out, it can be used for salt cure, it can be used for hacks prevention in general. It seems like it's generally better on bulky Pokemon or Pokemon that really need to do what they need to do and not get fake out flinched or something, like maybe a Talonflame. It might be good on, even though I prefer like Life Orb, but just the peace of mind knowing that you're gonna set up whatever it is, Trick Room or something. I might use it with like Armor Rouge, because it's good versus Snarl. I should say counter Snarl, good with mons that set up Tailwind, or Trick Room. And then Loaded Dice. that item, it can be overrated on certain mods, but in general, I don't think it's that overrated. It's probably about neutral. So scale shot is somewhat underrated, even though there's a lot of Pokemon that are immune or resistant to Dragon now, like Fluttermane everywhere and stuff. And then there's Pokemon with like relatively high defense, like Iron Bundle, even though they have low like HP, they could wall a scale shot unless it's maybe like Terra Dragon or something. So loaded dice, I found it does pretty well with like Rock Blast Tar. I think that's really underrated, and people do use it on Brute Bonnet, and you could even use it on like Dreadnought with Rock Blast. Loaded dice, I think, used to be a better ability when Sash. Well, it's a better ability when Sash was more common, like on Iron Bundle or whatever. It's still common though. Like you can still one shot a Fluttermane that's sashed or a Meowscarada sometimes or whatever. But Sash seems like it's gone down in usage, so loaded dice isn't quite as good as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. And the next one that's not overrated or underrated, I would say pretty much every item that's not listed as overrated or underrated is probably like not overrated or underrated. Like leftovers, citrus berry, all those ones. There are some items that are underrated though. Mental Herb, I think, is really underrated on Pokemon like Amoonguss or Mousehold, whatever, where they are trying to use a lot of support moves. It might be useful on like a Trick Room Pokemon too, maybe a Tailwinder. And then the next one is choice items. Yes, they can protect or wide guard to scout your item, but or I mean scout your move, I should say, because they know your item from OTS, but it still has a lot of power, and it might be better than something like I said, like Clear Amulet. And then weakness policy. Alright, by the way, you can use Choice Scarf too. Okay, to boost your speed. So weakness policy, that often gets activated on the right Pokemon, like Tyranitar, Armarouge even, to discourage a Snarl. If you're like weak to Snarl and you're a special attacker, that might be good, especially if you wall, for example, Arcanine's fire moves pretty well, like Flash Fire or something. And then Lumberry, that's pretty underrated because unlike safety goggles, Lumberry protects you from burn and all the other ones like random freezes. So if you're using it on a physical Pokemon that could get burned and have its attack halved, Lumberry might be better than safety goggles, but it doesn't go through redirection. So there is that drawback, but overall it could be really useful, especially if you have item claws and you already have safety goggles on something. It might be better than using a Terra Grass on it. Okay, next underrated item, like I was saying, use White Herb over Clear Amulet usually, or Band or something, Specs, whatever, because well, actually usually Clear Amulet's used on physical attackers because of Intimidate. You don't really see it on special attackers because they would probably use like Covert Cloak or Weakness Policy. Like Covert Cloak just kind of outclasses it in general on the special side because it counters Snarl, but it also counters like a lot of other things like Salt Cure. So don't use White Herb though if it's like a Dracometer or Overheat Pokemon, generally because they can just intimidate you and you don't want to get your item knocked off because of that. And then Wise Glasses, it's not that underrated because usually Life Orb or Specs or Expert Belt or Booster Energy is better for boosting your offense. But if like all of those are taken, or Expert Belt wouldn't be as good because you wouldn't likely super affect that many things, then you might want to use Wise Glasses. And then That's usually when item clause is an issue, though. And same with muscle band, is you would almost never use that unless you're using like a ton of those power boosting items, and there's item clause issue. If you're using like hard trick room or something, that might come into play, or hard tailwind. And then muscle band. I already said that. Yeah, same as wise glasses, except it's on the physical side. Zoom lens, that raises your accuracy by 20%. But yeah, 20% if you go last. So if there's a Pokemon that goes before you, then it won't work. And even if you make Rotom W or whatever min speed, it's still not going to be slow enough sometimes. So you almost might want to use wide lens with it. And then Big Root, it could be really useful on like our Bolivia. I'm surprised I haven't really seen it yet. I think everyone's just been using leftovers or whatever. But with Strength Sap and Leech Seed, you could heal back 30% more. So that would heal you probably more back than leftovers. And that 30% is huge. The Iron Ball item is also good because certain Pokemon can outspeed other Pokemon and be useful in Hard Trick Room. For example, I've ran Armarouge with Iron Ball before to make it outspeed Iron Hands and King Ambit, and that was really useful. And Apricot Berry, that's good on a Pokemon that has a lot of bulk and has the recovery move, like Rest on Dozo or Gastrodon or Garganacl, something. It might be good on it. You might want to test that out, but I'm just afraid that if you're letting them get you down to less than 25%, that's cutting it pretty close. At least you'll get the defense or special defense boost and then be able to recover or rest or whatever, but that's like really cutting it close, man. It's like if you have to be that low to get a boost, then you would have to recover your HP to like make good use out of it. Otherwise, they'll just finish you off even with the boost. And then Blender Policy. That item is not usually great, but it could be good with like a Rotom form. I need to look more into Dragon Darts. I believe that does activate if they have evasion or something. I'm not saying protect on that side, but like they have like evasion boost somehow, like Bright Powder or Sandveil or whatever, double team minimize, and you hit the other target twice. Even though you hit the other target twice, the fact that you miss that target counts as a miss for Blunder Policy. So it will activate, but overall Blunder Policy isn't that good, and it doesn't work with OHK moves. Now King's Rock, that's, I guess you could say, slightly underrated, but you could use some weird niche set with like Fling King's Rock, like Iron Bundle or something, but it's probably honestly not going to be that good. But like flinching them for a turn could be really good, especially like right after a fake out. You could then flinch like another Mon, and that would be pretty nice sometimes. So I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching the video. I'm going to make more videos, and I won a tournament last night, by the way, on February 11th. I got 3rd place, so I did pretty well in the Wide League tournament. I just got counter-teamed hard with like Goldango Roaring Moon versus Indeedee Armarouge, and I didn't even think of that as a counter until I realized, yeah, it counters the Terra Fairy and if it doesn't Terra, stall. So I had to go back to the drawing board, and now I think I have something. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.